Today we talk about men. They're half the equation in fertility, so let's figure out if they're half the problem by testing them. I'm Dr. Mark Amols, and this is Taco Bout Fertility Tuesday. In this episode of Talking About Fertility Tuesday, we're diving into the world of sperm health. We're going to be talking about the semen analysis and what it means. And we're going to specifically talk about two advanced tests that are coming out that help us understand male infertility. Now, when most people think of infertility, they think of the female. As a matter of fact, many female even think it's them. But the thing is that men are half the problem when it comes to infertility, and so we need to evaluate them. Now, unlike women who have multiple tests that they have to do, there really is just one test for men, which is the semen analysis. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't further tests for men. There are if there are problems found, but the first initial test to determine if there is a problem is going to be the semen analysis. Similar to how the menstrual cycle is kind of the medical health of the female, the semen analysis is kind of the medical health of the male. When the semen analysis is off, then we know there could be other things wrong, such as hormonal issues, or maybe even problems at the testicles. Just like when a woman's menstrual cycle is off, we know there could be other issues. The thing is, I'm always surprised when people come to me and say, oh, my semen analysis was normal. And they'll even tell me their doctor told them it was normal. And the thing is that really most physicians other than fertility doctors, not even urologists, really know what these parameters mean. And so what I want to do is I want to talk about these parameters, go over each step so you know what to look for. And then the last thing is we're going to talk about two new exciting things that are coming out. One of them you probably already have heard of, and one you probably haven't. I do want to apologize ahead of time for my voice. I am a little bit sick, but I still want to get this episode out. So what is a semen analysis? A semen analysis is essentially a man gives a sperm sample and then evaluates that for parameters. Now, usually men will masturbate into a cup and give the sample. There are times people cannot masturbate, and for that reason, there are other ways to get the sperm. One of those ways is going to be with a special condom where they can have intercourse and then put the condom in the cup, and then that can be evaluated. The other way is there is also vibratory stimulation that can also help with ejaculation, as well as an electrical stimulation that can also cause ejaculation. Now, there are basic parameters of a semen analysis. That includes the volume, the concentration, the count, the motility, and the morphology. Now, in addition to those, there are some other things, such as the grade or progressive motility, pH, viscosity, and liquefaction time. Other additional parameters would be vitality as well as fructose levels. And even further testing, you can look at things like white blood cells, round cells, agglutination, and even anti-sperm antibodies. But the basic main parameters are going to be volume, sperm concentration, count, motility, and morphology. So let's start first with volume. So the volume should be at least 1.5 milliliters or greater. That's not a lot of sperm. Matter of fact, many men are kind of freaked out when they realize how little sperm comes out. And that's actually normal. Now, it's important to understand that sperm itself doesn't take up a lot of volume. So most of the volume is coming from the prostatic fluid or the seminal vesicle fluid. When the volume is lower, there could be a problem. So if it's less than 1 milliliter, we call that hypospermia. So what kind of things can cause this? Well, one of them is called retrograde ejaculation. Especially men with diabetes can have problems with the ejaculatory process, and that can cause the sperm to actually go backwards into the bladder versus coming out of the penis. And so one of the things you do to evaluate that is you do a retrograde analysis. By after the semen analysis is given, you then check the urine and see if there's sperm in it. If there is sperm in it, then you have retrograde ejaculation. Other causes of having low volume can be things like a seminal vesicle blockage or prostatic blockage, or even a thing called congenital absence of the vas deferens, usually abbreviated CBAVD for congenital bilateral absence of the vas deferens. The vas deferens also comes from the same part that makes the seminal vesicles. So if you're missing the vas deferens, which carries the sperm from the testicle to the penis, you'll also be missing the seminal vesicles, which make up most of the volume, and that will cause you then to have low volume sperm. One of the ways we're able to distinguish the different types of volume issues is by looking at the pH. The prostate is more acidic and the seminal vesicles are more alkalinic. So if you're missing the seminal vesicles, you're going to have more acidic sperm. If the pH is normal and the volume's low, then you start thinking of other things such as an ejaculatory process issue. So then the question is, well, why does it matter? Well, it matters because the vagina is like an upside down triangle. We like to think of it as a tube, but it's not a tube. As you get towards the top of the vagina, it actually gets wider. And for this reason, the sperm, if it's very low volume, can kind of get lost in those vaginal folds and doesn't really cover the cervix as well, and that could lead to infertility. One of the best treatments for low volume is doing IUIs, because the sperm count is usually there, it's just low volume. If you have retrograde ejaculation, then they take the urine, clean it, take the sperm from it, and can also do IUIs if there's enough sperm. So that takes us next to sperm concentration. Now, when we think of sperm, we think of count. What's my count? How many sperm do I have? But in reality, it's not just about the count. It's about the concentration. It doesn't matter if you start with 1 billion sperm. If the concentration is low, it means you have very little sperm sitting at the cervix, because even though all that sperm is in the vagina, only the sperm touching the cervix is going to get in. So if you have a lot of sperm, but the volume is high and the concentration drops, you can also have infertility due to the fact that the sperm touching the cervix is a low count, even though the total count is good. The normal parameter for this is usually around 20 million sperm. Now, by definition of the WHO, they say it's greater than or equal to 15 million, but I usually like to use 20 million sperm. There's a second part to this, and that's the motility of the sperm. If your concentration, let's say, is 20 million sperm, but the motile concentration is less than 10 million, that can also cause infertility. So it's not just about the concentration, but the motile concentration, which then takes us to the next part, motility. When you hear motility, it sounds like we're talking about how fast the sperm is swimming. But what's interesting is that's not what motility means. Motility is more about how many are alive and how many are dead. So when you hear 30% motility, it doesn't mean your sperm is moving at 30% the speed of normal sperm. Instead, it's saying that 70% of your sperm is dead when you ejaculate it. Now, how does that affect fertility? Well, imagine if you're in a room with 100 people and you're shoulder to shoulder and squeezed into that room, and there's one door and you have to get out because there's a fire. Is it going to be that easy if 70 or more percent won't move? It's going to be tough to get out of the room. And you have a brain. You're able to actually move around people and figure this out. Sperm have no brains. And so in that situation, they can struggle to get to the cervix. All those dead sperm will just get in the way and prevent them from being able to move forward. Now, motility can then be broken into types of motility, which we call progressive motility. And this is important as well, because if you have 100% motility, that's great. Everything's alive, nothing's dead. But if they're just twitching and not moving, that doesn't help you much. And so this can be sometimes reported as a grade, like 4, 3, 2, or 1, or sometimes it will even give a percentage of progressive motile versus non-progressive motile. In general, you want at least greater than or equal to 40% of the sperm to be motile, or greater than 32% to be progressive motile. If the sperm isn't moving as well, then fewer of them are going to be able to get to the egg. Now, to appreciate that, you have to understand that in a normal situation where someone has normal sperm count and no issues, has multiple kids, when they ejaculate, there's millions of sperm ejaculated, but only 100,000 sperm actually get into the uterus. And of those 100,000 sperm, only 50 make it to the egg. So you can see now if the motility is, let's say, half of what it's supposed to be, then you can imagine that even fewer sperm are going to get the egg, if at any will. So then that takes us to total sperm count. The total sperm count is how much absolute sperm you have. And that needs to be multiplied by the motility to give you the total motile count. Now, in general, if all the parameters are normal, meaning the volume, the concentration, motility, morphology, then as long as you have about 20 million total motile sperm, you should be able to get pregnant naturally without many issues. Now, if it's between about 10 and 20 million, this is where people sometimes need artificial insemination, such as IUI. and even above 10, more like 12 and above for IUI. Now, if you have 10 total million sperm that are moving, then you're talking about IVF at this point. And if you're less than 5 million sperm, again moving, then you're talking about IVF with ICSI, where we inject the sperm into the egg. The last part is morphology. And a lot of people get worried about morphology because this is the way the head of the sperm is shaped. We only expect about 5% of sperm to be perfectly normal shaped. That means 95% of your sperm is not supposed to be perfectly normal shaped. But the thing is, the female reproductive tract is very good at filtering the sperm. So when the motility is only 2%, the morphology is only 2%, it sounds bad, but in reality, it's not that big of a deal because the female reproductive tract is still going to filter the sperm, so only the best of the best sperm get to the egg. Now, if there's only 0% normal sperm, that can be a little bit more concerning, and especially if there's other parameters, that might be something you need to talk to your doctor about. Now, where the morphology comes into play is that when it comes to IVF, if that morphology is low, we sometimes will do ICSI versus doing standard insemination. And this is not because the sperm is bad, but because we don't have a way to filter it like the female reproductive tract, and so we would be concerned that there would be lower fertilization rates without using ICSI. Now, I mentioned there are some other tests that are sometimes done, such as the pH and the liquefaction time, fructose levels, and looking at other things such as round cells, white blood cells, and agglutination. Now, for these, if they're off, this is something you're going to talk to your doctor about because those tests by themselves don't matter as much because IUI usually fixes all of them. Even sperm antibodies can be treated with doing IUIs. But in conjunction with other problems, it helps us at least understand the problem or let us know we need to do another test. So for example, if someone sees round cells, then the concern could be are they from leukocytes, being white blood cells, or is this spermatogenesis issue, meaning that the sperm did not develop correctly? If there's lots of agglutination, then there's concern of could there be antibodies or some type of infection. In the liquefaction time, it could be issues with prostatic enzymes that are not working well to liquefy the sperm. Fructose levels are looked at to determine that the seminal vesicles are functioning because that's where it comes from. And so if it's not there, then they would also point to the CBAVD issue or obstruction in the seminal vesicles. Now, some fun words to learn, in case you play Scrabble, are the sperm results. One is called oligospermia, and that's when you have a low sperm concentration. The other one is acinospermia, and that means reduced motility. If you hear teratosospermia, that means it has abnormal morphology. And if you hear the word azospermia, then that means there's no sperm at all in the ejaculate. Now, when we think about fertility, we often focus on the sperm count, the motility, and the morphology, the big three of the standard semen analysis. Now, while these are important, they are only part of the story. I always make the joke and say sperm is like the pizza delivery guy. You don't really care what the guy looks like, you care about what the pizza is like. And so the pizza is the DNA. And so if the DNA is not good, it doesn't matter if the pizza guy looks good. It's the DNA that we care about, which is the pizza you care about. So how do you look in that pizza box to find out if your pizza was damaged or if it was done correctly? Well, that's what sperm DNA fragmentation looks at. The quality of the sperm's genetic material, or in this case, the pizza. Even sperm that looks perfect under a microscope can have damaged DNA that makes it harder to achieve a healthy pregnancy. And then we have a new test called SpermQT. It's a new player in the field. Think of SpermQT as a deeper dive into not just the sperm's appearance, but its functionality. It's like running a full diagnostic test on a car instead of just kicking the tires. It looks at the things like how much energy the sperm can generate, how well it can withstand stress, and even molecular markers that tell us if it's ready to fertilize an egg. So why are these tests important? So let's start with DNA fragmentation. It's exactly what it sounds like. The DNA inside the sperm has breaks or damage. DNA is like a blueprint. It's the genetic instructions needed to create a baby. If that blueprint is torn or incomplete, the sperm may fertilize an egg, but the resulting embryo could have trouble developing normally. So what causes DNA fragmentation? Well, one of the big culprits is oxidative stress. This is when reactive oxygen species, also known as ROS, build up and overwhelm the sperm's natural defenses. It's like rust forming on a car. It happens over time, especially when exposed to harmful conditions like smoking, pollution, or even heat from tight clothing or varicose seals. We measure the DNA fragmentation with specialized tests called tunnel or SCISA, which can detect whether the DNA strands are broken. Higher levels of fragmentation are associated with lower chances of conception, higher miscarriage rates, and even reduced success with things like IVF. So as you can see, it does have an important part in the evaluation. But the good news is there are ways to improve it, such as lifestyle changes, antioxidant supplements, and even advanced sperm techniques such as the Zymo chip. This brings us then to SpermQT, which takes things even further. SpermQT is like the next generation of sperm testing. Instead of just looking at the sperm's count, motility, or DNA damage, it evaluates how the sperm actually functions. For example, SpermQT can measure mitochondrial activity. This tells us how much energy the sperm has to swim and reach the egg. It also looks at oxidative stress markers, which show whether the sperm is under attack from free radicals. But what makes SpermQT unique is its ability to combine all these factors into a predictive score. It doesn't just tell us what the sperm is doing right now. It gives us insight into how likely it is to succeed in fertilizing an egg. It's like getting the crystal ball for male fertility, based on science. The other cool thing about SpermQT is it uses cutting-edge technology, like machine learning algorithms. This allows it to even go deeper into analyzing the data from the sperm samples. Essentially, it's giving you a personalized fertility profile, which could be a game changer if you're facing unexplained infertility or repeated IVF failures. So the question is, the semen analysis has been around for a long time. Why do we need something different? Why should we stray from the normal semen analysis? The answer is, while traditional tests are great for giving us a snapshot of the sperm health, they don't tell us the whole story. And this is where DNA fragmentation and SpermQT add a further layer of detail that can help us better understand the root cause of the infertility and tailor treatments that are going to be more effective for you. Think of it as precision medicine, treating the individual, not just the symptoms. At New Direction Fertility Centers, we do not do these additional tests regularly. When it comes to sperm DNA fragmentation, I will look at it if we're not planning on using a Zymo chip because it may have an effect. The same thing when the SpermQT, use it when I'm in that situation where I have unexplained infertility and IVF cycles aren't working. However, as a general rule, most people just start with a semen analysis. And then from there, they can add other tests if needed. But usually those tests are not added unless there are further concerns of the sperm, such as IUIs failing or repeated IVF failures. If you do find out that your partner has high DNA fragmentation, you want to make sure that you make some lifestyle changes, take antioxidants, and see if your clinic uses the Zymo chip to be able to filter the sperm better. Hopefully this episode was helpful to you. Maybe you're going through this and have male factor problems or know someone who does. If so, maybe you just want to understand semen analysis or you have friends who are interested in that, please tell them about this podcast. And as always, if you like this podcast, please give us a 5-star review on your favorite medium, and most of all, keep coming back. I look forward to talking to you again next week on Taco Bout Fertility Tuesday.